Okay, no microphone right now just because I just got done recording. This video, and honestly, I need to figure out a better. I need to get a tripod basically if I want to record in front of my bookshelf. Because, yeah, obviously I need to get better shape. That's something I'm working on. But I need to find a tripod. So, yeah. Anyway, I'll see you in the video. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So, as you can tell from the title and the thumbnail, this is my books that made me fall in love with reading, my general list. This does include the books from last week, so I'm not going to talk too much about those ones, but I still wanted to name them because these, while they helped me fall in love with fantasy again, they also helped me fall in love with reading again. Okay, so I would need to find a good place to record from this angle in front of my bookshelf. I would need to find a good place for my microphone because I don't mind holding it. It's just I don't know if I want to stick on my shirt. That's the only thing. So up here didn't work so well, and like if I don't have my computer right there, which I do right now, if I don't have my computer right there, then that kind of loses the purpose. So I need to find a good place for my microphone, but for the purposes of this video, I'm just gonna hold it, and we're gonna go for it. So, like I said, we're talking about the books that made me fall in love with reading again. I think there are at least 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Let me actually pop in another book real quick. 1 moment. Okay, so I threw in 2 extra books, but I think, and it's also why I have my computer right up here as well, because, let me fix this real quick. There we go. I have, let's see, books that I've added in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've I've added about like 8 to 10 books. Well, not 10, like 8 to 9 books roughly to this list. And it's also why I have my computer up here, because there are a couple books that I do not have the physical copy for. Let me see if I can actually move my computer over here. 1 second. Okay, so for the purposes of this video, you're just at an angle right now. But to finally get into this video, the first book I want to talk about is one of the ones I do not have a physical copy for. It is Burn Down Master's House by Clay Kane. And to give you the description, which I have the story graph pulled up for, inspired by true long-buried stories of enslaved people who dared to fight back. In the midst of the Civil War, another war brews among the enslaved who are living enduring in the shadow of the plantations, imposing monuments to power and tyranny. Their interconnected journeys of rebellion and kinship unite them in a long-seething need for justice. In an ultimate act of revolution, they will get it. So that's like the basic little blurb you need to know for Burn Down Master's House, and honestly, it is such an amazing read, very powerful. There are some sensitive, potentially triggering topics, so look into those if you need to go over those. I personally am not the best when talking about triggering topics. I do have some triggering topics. It's just, in general, I'm usually okay with reading. Usually I'm not super triggered when I'm reading, even though I do have some topics that are a little more triggering, but usually reading I'm okay. So, to continue with this list, the next book is The Fox Wife by Yangsze Choo. I talked about this in last Wednesday's video, so not going to talk about it too much more. or not going to mention it or not going to discuss it. And also, for context, I don't have this last week's video linked down below, but I have the playlist linked down below where I have the books that made me fall in love with reading playlist. I have that linked down below in the description, and that playlist will also be linked in the end card at the end of the video for like the last 5 seconds of the video. So just be aware it is linked. It's just the playlist that's linked, not the video. But anyway, moving on. The next book. There you are. The next book is Bloodbound by Ellis. Again, I talked about it last week. And then next up is What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. And this could sort of fall under fantasy a little bit, but I do consider this more historical fiction fantasy, where like fantasy is kind of more of a subplot in this. But, let's try it this way. So, Bolivian Argentinian Inez Olivera belongs to the glittering upper class society of the 19th century Buenos Aires. And like the rest of the world, the town is steeped in old world magic that's been largely left behind or forgotten. Inez has everything a girl might want, except for the one thing she yearns for the most: her globe-trotting parents who frequently leave her behind. When she receives the word of their tragic deaths, Inez inherits their massive fortune and a mysterious guardian, an archaeologist in partnership with his Egyptian brother-in-law. Yearning for answers, Inez sails to Cairo, bringing her sketch pads and a golden ring her father sent to her for safekeeping before he died. But upon her arrival, the old world magic tethered to the ring pulls her down a path where she discovers there's more to her parents' disappearance than what her guardians led her to believe. So that's what this is about. Really great read. Honestly loved it. And like, it is fantasy, and I think the fantasy is a big component in this, but it is kind of like on equal footing with the historical fiction aspect, which is why I didn't include it in last week's, where last week's I was focusing more on books that were heavier with the fantasy. Not necessarily heavy-handed, but where fantasy took a larger, heavier role in the story. But What the River Knows, I do still need to read book 2, but I'm getting there. I'm going to get there hopefully this year. Next up is The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton. I talked about this one last week. A great childhood read though. But after that is... I'm also trying to keep track of where I'm at on my computer because, again, I don't have physical copies for all these books. So, next up is The Lion Women of Tehran by Marjan Kaamali. Excuse me. So, I'll probably have to try to pick up the stationery shop because that one does sound interesting. The only reason why I mention that is because it says from the nationally best-selling author of the stationery shop. So, excuse me, I'm a little bit coffee right now. In 1950s Tehran, 7-year-old Ellie lives in grand comfort until the untimely death of her father, forcing her and her mother to move to a tiny home downtown. Lonely and bearing the brunt of her mother's endless grievances, Ellie dreams of having a friend to alleviate her isolation. Luckily, on the first day of school, she meets Homa, a kind, passionate girl with a brave and irrepressible spirit. Together, the two girls play games, learn to cook in the stone kitchen of Homa's warm home, wander through the colorful stalls of the Grand Bazaar, and share their ambitions for becoming lion women. But their happiness is disrupted when Ellie and her mother are afforded the opportunity to return to their previous bourgeois life. As Ellie enjoys her new popularity at the best girls' high school in Iran, her memories of Homa begin to fade. Years later, however, Homa's sudden reappearance in Ellie's privileged world alters the course for both of their lives. Together, the two young women come of age and pursue their own goals for meaningful futures. But as the political turmoil in Iran builds to a breaking point, one earth-shattering betrayal will have enormous consequences. So let's continue on the back. So that's what this is about. Absolutely love the story. Very, very heartfelt and a lot of not necessarily tragic points, but there are a few tragic points, but it's very heart-wrenching. So, very good book. And then next up is another really good book that I fell in love with, As Long as Lemon Trees Grow by Choo. This is my land, and just like the lemon trees that have been growing here for centuries, spilled blood won't stop us. Salama Kassab was a pharmacy student when the cries for freedom broke out in Syria. She still had her parents and her big brother. She still had her home in an average teenager's life. Now Salama volunteers at a hospital in Homs, helping the wounded who flood through the doors daily. Secretly, though, she is desperate to find a way out of her beloved country before her best friend and sister-in-law, Layla, gives birth. As her desperation grows, her PTSD takes physical shape in the form of companion Kawaf, who haunts Kawaf. I don't think I'm pronouncing that right. Who haunts her every move. But even with Kawaf pressuring her to leave, Salama is torn between her loyalty to her country and her will to survive. She must contend with bullets and bombs, military assaults, and her shifting sense of morality before she might finally breathe free. And when she crosses paths with the boy she was supposed to meet one faithful day, she starts to doubt her resolve in leaving home at all. So that's what this one's about. It's another very heart-wrenching read, a necessary read. I think this and The Lion Women of Tehran are very important to read right now, and just for one, diversifying your reading, two, for context of what's going on in our world, and just to have like another perspective thrown into the mix of your reading and your worldview. So I absolutely love it. But politics aside, this is just such a beautifully told story about love and friendship and the different kinds of love and the need to survive and then getting that. So, or getting what you wanted at the end. So this is a really heart-wrenching story, a really beautiful story though. Next up is Violet Thistlewaite is Not a Villain Anymore by Emily Krempholtz. Talked about this last week, but really good read. And the ones that I talked about last week, they are all really good reads. I'm going to try not to say that every single time I bring up a book that I mentioned last Wednesday. But even if I don't say that, they're all really good reads, and I'm including them. Excuse me. I'm including them in this video for a reason. So next up is Under the Oak Tree by Suji Kim. Mentioned last week. Absolutely love it. I'm currently rereading it, actually. And then next up is just kind of like a general topic, but Natasha Lester book. So you can see my sort of row here. But the one I'm going to mention is The Paris Orphan by Natasha Lester. But honestly, any Natasha Lester books. In this one specifically, New York City / Paris, 1942, when American model Jessica May arrives in Europe to cover the war as a photojournalist for Vogue, most of the soldiers are determined to make her life as difficult as possible. But 3 friendships change that. Journalist Martha Gellhorn encourages Jess to bend the rules. Captain Dan Halworth keeps her safe in dangerous places so she can capture the stories that truly matter. And most of all, the love of a little orphan named Victorine gives Jess strength to do the impossible. But her success will come at a price. France, 2005. 6 years after World War II, Darcy Halworth arrives at a beautiful chateau to curate a collection of famous wartime photos by a reclusive artist. It is the opportunity of a lifetime, but Darcy has no idea that this job will uncover decades of secrets that will change everything she thought she knew about her mother, Victorine, and alter Darcy's life forever. So I absolutely love this story. I've talked about it a little bit, but there was a time in my life, maybe like sophomore, junior year of high school, which was like 2015, 2016 or so, 2014, 2015, 2016, where when I was reading, I was only reading history, nonfiction, and then mythology. And then that lasted through to my sophomore year at university. And so that was about, well, my freshman year maybe. So that was maybe like 2017, 2018, 2019. And that's when I started reading a little bit more fiction. I started with historical fiction, and this is what I started with. And I fell in love with the story, and Natasha Lester has become an auto-buy author for me. I would love to reread this, but I don't think I'd be able to. I'm getting a little bit emotional thinking about it. But I absolutely loved The Paris Orphan. I still love it to this day. Again, I don't think I can reread it. Not just because my opinion might change. I don't think my opinion would change or my perception would change. I don't think that's the case. It's just how heart-wrenching this was. A lot of these are, and it's just, I think it's how heart-wrenching this story was, on top of the fact that it was like my first book getting back into fiction. That is just like, it's like the convergence of the two that is just like, I don't think I can read this again. But it is one of my favorites, all-time favorites. So, Paris Orphan, any Natasha Lester books though. So if you want me to do like a ranking of Natasha Lester books, I can and will do that. Let me know in the comments if you've made it this far in the video and want to see a video about ranking Natasha Lester's books. Comment down below. So, but we are not done yet. Sorry, you're shaking a little bit in this video as well. Next up is another one I talked about last week, For Whom the Bell Tolls by Jaysea Lynn. Absolutely love that one. And then next up is Cabinet of Curiosities. This is why I have my computer in front of me, because I was about to pick up the next book list back, but I do have these in alphabetical order based on author last name, just to keep it as clear as possible, and just to make it easy on me when listing these out and doling these out. But this was another book that I do not have a physical copy of, but I was about to reach for the next physical book. But I do want to get this book soon, hopefully. It's Cabinet of Curiosities by Mahnke. It's based off of the podcast, and it's basically a bunch of little curious stories. And the title is derived from like a cabinet of curiosities, like a curio cabinet. So honestly, very interesting tales, like stories. Like one of them, as a slight spoiler, but it's based on like curious stories from history, so like true stories that actually happened that are like really curious. So one of them is about how the brother of John Wilkes Booth, I think it was like after John Wilkes Booth had killed Abraham Lincoln, but his brother Edwin Booth was at a train station and someone was about to get hit by the oncoming train or fall into the tracks or something, and Edwin Booth pulls him up and saves him. And the person he had saved was Robert Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's son. So it's like curious stories like that. And that's, I mean, I'm glad Robert Lincoln did not die in that moment. And it is sad that Edwin's brother, John Wilkes Booth, did kill Abraham Lincoln, but it's like the little confluence of those that happening. Like his brother killed Abraham Lincoln, but he saved Robert Lincoln. So it's like little curious stories like that. But next up to continue is something I talked about last week with the Never After novels. I mentioned Crossed last week. But honestly, you can see them here. It is Wretched. That's the one I couldn't remember last week, actually. Wretched, Hooked, Scarred, Hexed, and Twisted. Twisted was the one I couldn't remember last week, about Jasmine and Jafar. But those are all basically dark romance twists on their original tales, where the villain gets the love interest. So to move on to the next one, and that is The Bog Queen by Anna North, or Bog Queen. And this one, I absolutely love this. I listened to this as an audiobook, which I highly recommend, but the only thing is that this is dual timeline, so it can be a little bit confusing if you're not used to dual timeline. But I do recommend it as an audiobook. When a body is found, When a body is found in northwest England, Agnes, an American forensic anthropologist, is called to investigate. But this body is not like any she's ever seen. Though its bones prove it was buried more than 2,000 years ago, it is almost completely preserved. Saint Agnes is drawn into a mystery from the distant past, called to understand the average death, called to understand and avenge the death of an Iron Age woman more than like more like her than she knows. Along the way, she must contend with peat cutters who want to profit from the bog and activists who demand that the land be left undisturbed. Then there's the moss itself, a complex repository of artifacts and remains with its own dark stories to tell. As Agnes faces the deep history of what she has unearthed, she is also forced to question what she thought she knew about her talent, her self-resilience, and her place in the world. Flashing between the uncertainty of post-Brexit England and Europe at the dawn of the Roman era, Bog Queen brims with contemporary urgency and ancient wisdom as it connects across time. Two gifted, far-sighted young women who learning to harness their strange strengths and landscape more mysterious and complex than either can imagine. I honestly love this book so much, and I think it was such like a unique take on historical fiction, and one that's not done enough. Like, yes, it does have like the contemporary timeline, but it is also historical fiction because like half of it is focusing on the historical part, and I think that is such a unique take on historical fiction and focusing on that time frame because it's like yes, we have so much from that time frame, but at the same time it is so little from that period of time that it's like it's hard to decipher really. Like we know roughly what they did, roughly what they ate, sort of what the culture was, but there's so much we don't know that it's like it's easier to play around with. So that's the Bog Queen by Anna North. And then next up is Greenteeth, Molly and Neil. I talked about this last week. And I need to figure out. That's okay, actually. Next up is the Ardenshire series by Jay Penner. Talked about this last week. And also, I have one of my bunnies out playing, so I'm just occasionally checking on her. I don't know if I've actually checked on her in this video. Hi, Pepper. Hi, Pepper. I have a bunny named Pepper. I have a few bunnies, and Pepper is out playing, but she usually just... I have a corner bookshelf, and she usually just stays in like the empty corner on the bottom, and that's because she has cataracts. So she can still see some like pinpricks of some light and shadows, and her hearing's still good. So she just tends to stay there because she like just her comfort spot. So I just try to talk to her a little bit. Anyway, I mentioned the Ardenshire series, and then next up is The London Seance Society by Sarah Penner. I was about to say another author's name, and I was like, wait a second, wrong author for the wrong book. Next up, Little Man of Disneyland, a duology. I am going through these last couple ones kind of quickly because these were ones I mentioned last week, but the very last one is one I'll talk about. Next up is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. The second to last book recommendation, Gods of the Duat, the Gods Universe series by Alessa Thorn. Excuse me. And then last but certainly not least is one that I did not mention last week. Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. I do have Good Dirts like right there where my pinky is. I need to read that. And in Black Cake, in present-day California, Eleanor Bennett's death leaves behind a puzzling inheritance for two children, Byron and Benny, a traditional Caribbean black cake made from a family recipe with a long history, and a voice recording. In her message, Eleanor shares a tumultuous story about a headstrong young swimmer who escaped her island home under suspicion of murder. The heartbreaking tale Eleanor unfolds the secret she still holds back, and the mystery of a long-lost child challenge everything the siblings thought they knew about their lineage and themselves. Can Byron and Benny reclaim their once close relationship, piece together Eleanor's true history, and fulfill her final request to share the black cake when the time is right? Will their mother's revelations bring them back together or leave them feeling more lost than ever? I wasn't expecting to like this because this is somewhat historical fiction, but it's more like literary historical fiction, which I'm not a huge lit girl, but like that's nothing really against the genre. It's not my cup of tea. But like I think this had just enough balance between the lit fic and the historical fiction that it's like it works so well, and I absolutely love the story. I would like a recipe for black cake, and like I would, if any of you know a good recipe that I could try, which I'd like to try black cake and be like, hey, I read the book, I made a black cake. These are my thoughts. So if any of you guys if you've made it this far in the video, and if you know anyone, if you have a good recipe or know anyone who has a good recipe for black cake, let me know. And because I'd love to make it. So that is the end of this video. If you made it to the end, there were the 2 questions from earlier where I forgot the earlier one. But it is what it is. There's a question from earlier. I think it was like ranking my Natasha Lester, doing a video ranking the Natasha Lester books, and then the question just now about black cake recipe. But if you made it specifically to this point, let me know down below in the comments, what is a book that got you into reading or back into reading? And with all that said, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.